Tomorrow, there are three important mid-cycle elections to decide who will be the mayor of New York City and who will serve as governor in the states of New Jersey and Virginia. The divide between the candidates has been nationally discussed, despite the fact that these are local elections. There have been debates and town halls, polling, and plenty of early voting. You might even call it a voting season in Virginia, since the polls have been open since mid-September, long before much of the information that might sway a vote was even out there. Nearly 900,000 people had voted by October 24th, and in just the last week, another 178,000 more have cast their ballots. In New York City, the lines for early voting ran around the block right up to the deadline of 9 p.m. In politics, honest debating of the issues ought to be the rule. However, while smear campaigns, innuendo, and scandal have always been a part of the political system, today it seems to be even worse. The divide in the electorate is a vast chasm that seems to prohibit open discussion of issues. Debate was my milieu all through high school. I loved learning the logic of it, and even the research and prepping for contests was fun. Still, the best part was actually participating, listening to your opponent's arguments and looking for exactly the best way to oppose them. It was more than just dueling references. It was being able to identify their red herrings, ad hominem attacks, appeals to authority, and false dilemmas or premises. I loved every minute of it. And my partner and I, we did rather well. My father was perhaps my most ardent fan and coach. Sunday afternoons were often debate extravaganzas in the living room with Newsweek and Time magazines scattered on the coffee table. He would pick a topic and I would pick a side. Then we would go at it for hours. Made my mother uncomfortable when our voices rose. Maybe that's the source of my Jewish soul, the fact that I tend to lean into arguments. Friends and siblings alike will tell you that I have opinions on nearly everything. Jews, it turns out, argue about everything from how to make the best brisket to which candidate to support to whether or not anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. The Talmud is nothing more than continuous arguments between ancient rabbis and sages about a variety of religious and legal topics. Hillel and Shammai were two famous teachers in the 1st century BCE. They had opposing approaches to Jewish law, with Hillel taking a more lenient view and Shammai being more tied to strict adherence to the letter of the law. One of the most famous stories illustrating their views was of the Gentile who sought conversion to Judaism. He asked each scholar to summarize the Torah while he, the convert, stood on one foot. Shammai, offended by the request, drove the potential convert away with a measuring stick. Hillel famously said to the man who stood there with one foot in the air, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation of this. Go and study it. Unlike today, these two men who voraciously opposed one another on religious and legal topics frequently dined together and married into each other's families. The reason is because although their disagreements ran deep, their respect for one another ran deeper. The sages call it machloket l'shem shamayim, or a disagreement for the sake of heaven. Ethics of the Fathers 5:17. What it means is that the argument is not driven by ego or wrestling for power, but by a sincere search for truth. One of the most famous arguments is in this week's Parsha Vayera. It's between Abraham and God, after Abraham learned that the 3 men who visited him were sent with a purpose. 2 of the men set off in the direction of Sodom, while the 3rd remained with Abraham, who stood there before the Lord. Abraham started the argument. Genesis 18:23-25. And Abraham said, Will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that the innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? God agreed to save the city for the sake of 50, so Abraham began to bargain for 45, for 40, 35, 30. Down he went while the Lord agreed to save the city for the sake of those innocent ones. When Abraham convinced God to save Sodom for the sake of 10 good men, the Lord departed and Abraham went home. Turns out there weren't even 10 good men there, and we all know the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham wasn't the only one who argued with God. Moses also challenged God when he threatened to annihilate the Israelites after the sin of the golden calf, as well as on multiple other occasions when the Israelites became obstinate or complained too much. Neither Abraham nor Moses was rebelling or questioning God's authority. They were both appealing to his divine mercy. They were unlike Korah, who challenged Moses and Aaron not because he was seeking truth, but because he wanted power over the people. And there's a vast difference between the two. The Hebrew word Yisrael, Israel, was the name given to Jacob after his wrestling match with the man who confronted him on the banks of the Jabbok. Yisrael means one who wrestles with God and man. That is quite literally the definition of a Jew and has become their national identity. The late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory once wrote, "Judaism is a culture of argument, and that is its strength. Truth on earth is not, nor can it ever be, the whole truth." In other words, there's always more to learn that will shed light on your argument. Faith is not about blind obedience. Arguing with God in search of the truth can actually be an act of faith. That is true as well for our arguments with one another. Nothing is gained, no truth is discovered if the discussion devolves into name-calling, stubborn refusal to consider the other side, or running away. When will we as a society get to the place where families can sit down at the Thanksgiving table and have a lively disagreement while still remaining deeply in love with one another, still respecting each other, still wanting to break bread with them? When will we start caring more about relationships than winning and seek truth rather than power? Online debates are perhaps the most common and the worst way to conduct a civil disagreement. It takes far more courage to face your opponent. Be passionate about what you believe, but know enough facts to support your argument. Listen to others more ardently. Ask questions to which you honestly don't know the answer. Express yourself without resorting to logical fallacies or raising your voice. Finally, remember that it's not about winning. It's about truth, and it's about time we learn to do that more effectively.